Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us for this webinar, Technology Leading the Way, Supporting Rural Communities and Businesses. My name is Aidan O'Carroll, and I'm Chair of the IOD in Scotland, and I'm delighted to introduce this session with a great panel who will be sharing insights around a number of things in terms of the art of the possible, in terms of how we can mobilize technologies, ideas, and expertise that can be tapped in to support, boost, and engage all businesses and all communities within the rural community overall. I'm just on the back of helping to host a two-day innovation forum up in the Highlands and Islands, where we had over 150 participants linking in to private equity, looking at the growth prospects of business, looking at how to collaborate more effectively in order to increase not just the business presence in the rural economy and in Highlands and Islands. And when you think about the opportunities in the south of Scotland as well, they really are immense. And coming off the back and hopefully coming out of the pandemic, there are a whole number of opportunities that we need to grasp and make the new norm. And perhaps this is a start to look at how we mobilize technology to help us do that. So I'm delighted to introduce this session. IOD in Scotland is very much supporting the whole of the Scotland economy and communities. And we have at the moment a small presence in south of Scotland based in Dumfries, run by Paul Holden and Mark Craig. But we're very much hoping to increase our presence and increase our connectivity by running things like investment forums and opportunities. But this is just a great opportunity to be part of something that is going to be, I think, of broader interest to the community at large in south of Scotland. So with that, and without further ado, let me hand you over to Shelley Breckenridge, first off from Interface.
Thank you, Aidan, for introducing today's webinar. Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to our webinar, Technology Leading the Way, Supporting Rural Communities and Businesses. I'm part of the team at Interface, and we're really delighted to host this webinar in partnership with Institute of Directors, South of Scotland Enterprise and SRUC. We'll get started in just a moment, but before we do, here's a reminder of today's agenda. I'm going to kick things off with an introduction to Interface and examples of how we've supported businesses in adopting new technologies. I'm then going to hand over to Susan from South Scotland Enterprise, who will give an overview of the agency and their support available. We'll then hear from Paul Mayfield from SRUC, SAC Consulting, about innovation and emerging technologies in the agri-food sector. And finally, we'll hear from Wilma of Ethical Dairy about her experiences. So a wide-ranging series of presentations, and we'll finish off the session with some Q&A, so you have the opportunity to pose questions to us all directly. Just some quick housekeeping. You can ask questions throughout the webinar, and these will be answered within the Q&A session at the end, which my colleague Heather Rattray will be managing. To ask questions, please use the chat functionality through the speech bubble icon on the toolbar to show the chat stream on the left-hand side of your screen. And finally, the webinar is being recorded and will be hosted online afterwards. Okay, so let's get started. As an introduction to Interface, we are a business support organisation that's been operating in Scotland for 16 years. And we exist with a very specific remit. We are here to help link Scottish businesses into the talent, expertise, knowledge that exists within our universities, research institutes and colleges. And we've been doing that very, very well since 2005. We work with any business in any sector looking for any type of expertise. But really what we're looking for are businesses that are looking to develop new products, processes or services, carry out research, perhaps even just solve business challenges where they lack the knowledge or resource in-house. Often that knowledge and resource exists within our universities, and we are here to help make connections that will allow you to take your ideas forward, address challenges, and enable businesses to grow, innovate, and prosper. So next slide, please, Heather. And this is what we're helping linking into. This is why we're doing it. Scotland's university sector and our research institutes and colleges have an abundance of knowledge and expertise. I'm not going to read out what's on the slide, it speaks for itself, but this is just really to give you an indication of the wealth of talent that this is out there that is available to all Scottish businesses to tap into through the Interface Support Service. Next slide, please, Heather. And this is who we're helping you link into. Interface acts as one door into all higher education and further education in Scotland. We're completely impartial. It's also a free service. So there's no agenda from our perspective. All we're here to do is try and help businesses to innovate and grow through academic collaboration. And you can see there's such a wide range of organisations. One of the things that we hear often from the companies that we support is, we take a lot of the time and effort out of finding an academic partner. There's an awful lot of institutions on that slide there, and universities often don't have a front door. You don't know where to go. So rather than going around and knocking on lots of doors, you can come to us and we will do that for you. Next slide, please, Heather. Now, this just gives you an indication of the reach of Interface and what we've achieved over the last 16 years. Each dot on that map is a business that we have supported, and I really love it. I think it gives such a good indication, and you can see that even in the most remote parts of Scotland, we have been able to support businesses. So geography is no barrier at all. And you can see there's also a very good representation across the south of Scotland, which is fantastic to see. So the slide just gives you some facts and figures. On your left-hand side, you'll see sort of numbers that we're dealing with. So we really know what we're doing in terms of brokering collaborations. And on the right-hand side, I suppose, is the why we do what we do. We do it because it benefits businesses. They see real tangible benefits coming out of academic collaborations that allows them to grow. And there's also some pretty interesting stats around, whether the projects would have gone ahead without Interface's intervention, and also just, the fact that it's often an area of expertise outside of a business's core activities that they need help with, and that's part of what we'll touch on today. Next slide, please. So the way their service works is very straightforward. We've streamlined it over the last 16 years, so it's as easy, seamless as possible for our clients. When a business comes to us, by whatever means, they usually have one thing in common. They have a challenge or an issue, and they lack the in-house knowledge or resource to deal with it themselves. So every collaboration that we start begins with a conversation. You will be linked into one of our business engagement team, of which I am one. There's 10 of us based around the country, so no matter where you are, there's a local point of contact that businesses can speak to talk about your problems. And we'll have a conversation with you about what it is you're looking to do and really delve into the detail of how we might be able to support you. So we work one-on-one with businesses to help draw out their challenge and take their business needs and translate it into something for an academic partner. And that's a really big part of what we do. So once we've agreed what a project might look like, what we then do is reach out to our contacts within the academic base and give it out to as broad a range of partners as possible and allow them to come back to us with any expressions of interest. We then present those expressions of interest to the business so they're able to make an informed decision as to whom they might want to speak to. And then we're able to make introductions and make that connection happen. And then businesses are able to go into more detailed discussions about what a project might look like. Now, we stay on hand throughout that process. We help nudge things along. We help provide guidance. We help answer a lot of questions. The majority of companies we're supporting are working with academia for the first time. We're very much there to hold people's hands along the way and make it as easy as possible. Now, we're not a funder ourselves, but we do also, as part of the service, try and help identify ways of offsetting the cost of working with academia, because obviously that comes at a cost. And part of what we do is keep an eye on local funding schemes, grants, competitions, as well as having a good understanding of what student-based opportunities might be out there to help support businesses in delivering projects. Next slide, please. And just to touch on about funding, whilst Interface isn't a funder ourselves, we do administer a funding scheme called the Innovation Voucher. And this is a £5,000 grant available to all Scottish businesses to work with an academic partner for the first time. It's very much seed funding. It's intended to kickstart a new relationship with an academic partner to help develop either a new product, process or service, which is the first voucher outlined there, or to help develop workforce innovation within an organisation, so much more inward facing. Both of these are available to businesses within Scotland, and they can be a really, really useful mechanism to start that relationship with an academic partner. They don't require cash match funding. They can be matched with a business's in-house resource. So they're quite a good low-risk way of engaging with an academic partner for the first time, with a view to then hopefully carrying on that engagement beyond the £5,000 grant into much more impactful and deeper relationships. Now, there is some criteria around that. This is a very brief slide that we've got up here, and all that information is available on our website. But essentially, it needs to pay for they need to be used for projects that really require the academic input. It can't cover things that can be delivered commercially. Again, all that information is available on our website and can be easily accessed. Next slide, please. So the focus of today is helping rural businesses adopt technologies. And I'm just going to very quickly run through some recent examples of companies that we have supported in the past year in this particular way. So One Lockhead Museum in Dumfries and Galloway is an 18th century lead mine where visitors can usually go on an underground mine tour, visit miners' cottages and see how they lived during the 18th, 19th and 20th centuries. It's a really important site within a rural part of the south of Scotland. And as well as a physical tour, there's also a miners' library which holds almost 3,000 books and is one of the oldest subscription libraries in Europe. So obviously this is a business built on visitor experience, and usually they have around 7,000 annual visitors. The COVID had a hugely negative impact on them last year. Now in May of 2020, we at Interface joined forces with Visit Scotland and the Scottish Tourism Alliance to launch the Adopt a Business scheme. And this was an initiative aimed at boosting the sector's recovery from COVID-19 by connecting tourism businesses to university academics and students. And One Lockhead Museum got in touch with us off the back of that initiative because they were looking to develop an informed digitisation strategy that would help carry them through this particularly difficult time. They recognised that they had valuable resources in the library which could be much more widely shared on a digital platform. And while social distancing would make it very difficult to do the mine tours, a virtual tour, if that could be created, would widen their audience and increase access for those not physically able to enter the mine. So they had lots of really good ideas, but they lacked the in-house knowledge to take that forward. So we were able to match them with two academics, one from Edinburgh and one from Glasgow University, who worked jointly on making this happen. And the academics were very fortunately able to secure funding from the University of Glasgow, which allowed them to create and test digital marketing solutions for the museum, as well as being able to purchase the necessary equipment to do this. And what they've been able to do is create a static scenes virtual reality tour for the lead mine, the miners' library and the miners' cottages, as well as audio narrations for these VR scenes, which is obviously a fantastic result. And to further support this, the universities have continued to support the museum through student marketing projects. And late last year, they also launched a Facebook campaign to test to facilitate donations to the fundraiser and build more of a social media following. And both the academics have continued to support the museum throughout this time. So it's quite a nice example of how a rural business in the south of Scotland was able to sort of tap into that expertise and really allow them to diversify and adapt to the current circumstances and get them through what was a very difficult period for a lot of tourism businesses. The next slide, please. Another example, this time in a more educational setting, is with Millport Conservation Area Regeneration Scheme. Now, this is an initiative that aims to preserve the historical features of Millport and reinvigorate it as a seaside and island destination. And these conservation works are supported by an outreach plan, which aims to engage with the local community and visitors. And one of the aims of the outreach plan was to engage local children via a series of face-to-face workshops that would explore the history and heritage of the area. But due to COVID-19 and the resulting isolation rules for homeschooling, they needed to develop very quickly an alternative for the planned face-to-face activities. And they had an idea to use Minecraft, the hugely popular gaming platform, to engage with the children. But obviously, they didn't have the know-how to do that themselves. So they turned to Interface to help find a suitable partner that could develop a heritage-themed interactive game that could be used both in the classroom and remotely in a home learning environment, all of which needed to be delivered on a very modest budget. So through our matching process, we linked them to the renowned School of Design and Informatics at Abertay University, which is Europe's top-ranked institution for video games education. And in this example, it was actually games students that we linked them to, and they worked on the project for 3 months, supervised by their academic supervisor, and all the time working remotely, using images and other online resources as their only point of reference. And most impressively, they were able to develop Cumbry Craft, which is an educational interactive game housed on the Minecraft educational platform. And that's been designed with 8 distinct lessons that allows children to explore local heritage landmarks and learn more about the history. So again, a really lovely example of how digital technology can be applied to enhance a real world challenge, and how games can engage young people with learning about heritage in a visual and fun way. And depending on the success of this project, the potential is there to implement it across other schools in North Ayrshire, as well as potentially package it up for other conservations across Scotland. So that's just a very quick couple of examples of how we've supported the adoption of technology. And I'll just hand over to Susan now to talk us through the South of Scotland Enterprise and their activities.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Susan Harkins, and I'm one of the head of area operations in the South of Scotland Enterprise Agency. And I'd just like to introduce you to the agency today and give you just a feel for what we're about, and also some of the support that we've provided for business over the last year, and then our plans for the coming year. So could I get the next slide? Yeah. The South of Scotland Enterprise Agency came into being as part of the South of Scotland Enterprise Act in 2019. We started trading on the 1st of April 2020 at the start of a pandemic, which maybe wasn't the best time to start, but we've been doing all our delivery digitally. The Act and the agency is focused purely on the South of Scotland. It's to further the sustainability, economic and social development of the South of Scotland and improve amenity in the environment. It sets out 15 examples of our activity, and I won't go into them all, but an exciting thing about it is that our focus on an inclusive growth economy, that's what we're working towards, and fair work is integral to that legislation and to everything that we do. Can we get the next slide, please? So what will we do? Our vision is to establish the South of Scotland as a centre of opportunity, innovation and growth. And we will work with people and businesses and communities right across the South of Scotland to grow the economy. And that's by providing investment, expertise and mentoring. We really want to inspire and unlock that ambition within the South of Scotland. The real focus, we have some really strong values. Our values are, just check my notes, but I do know them off by heart. We want to be bold, striving, inclusive and responsible. And these are, I think, really strong values, but we want to include everyone. So one of the great things about our approach is it is a place-based approach. So we want to include all businesses and communities and work with them around about that enterprising agenda. We don't want to exclude any businesses, so we recognise that the South of Scotland is actually, I think it's something like 92% are micro businesses, and we want to work with those micro businesses, existing businesses. We want to stimulate innovation, business improvement, but I think the important thing is that we look at the place space, and the actual businesses and their place within that place, and how important they are, and how we can support them to become, wherever it's more innovative, wherever it's about business improvement. It could be about recovery from COVID, robustness. So we're actually trying to tailor our support, really a tailored support to that individual business, as opposed to a one size fits all, which is a challenge. But I think in the long term, it means that we will try to develop an inclusive economy. Could I get the next slide, please? So just want to talk a little bit, just to give you a feel, because it's okay speaking and giving you all these great words, but what are we actually doing? So when, as I said, we set up in a global pandemic. We had a lot, as everyone has experienced, businesses were in crisis. There was a lot of turmoil, as there still is, but we supported 300 businesses in South of Scotland around the Perth and Creative Hospitality Hardship Fund. And that was towards the beginning of the year. So when we first just established, we did all that virtually. We then designed and administered the Wedding Fund, grant fund as well. And also through our own funds, we supported 172 organisations through the COVID period. Most crisis, but some definitely around adaptation and diversification, which was quite welcome in the face of the crisis. Could I have the next slide, please, Heather? So moving forward, we want to become much more proactive. The last year's been very reactive, as I think everyone would expect. And really about the last year has been about meeting the demands as it came up from businesses around COVID, crisis and adaptation. But going forward, we have a team of business specialists. We are building on that team. So I think at the moment, our operations team, which covers our business support, is sitting about 40, 45 individuals. I think we aim to get that up to about 80 within this current year. So we're really trying to drive forward more staff, more business and front-facing support within SOSI. We have the frontline business specialists. They're our main point, our first point of contact. They're there to work one-to-one with each business. And really, as I've gone back to say earlier, it's about tailoring that support to the business needs, working out how we can support that business to get through any barriers that's, is it a barrier to growth? Is it just a barrier to be more robust, more sustainable? So really just working with businesses to identify that. We have engaged in the last year with over 1,000 businesses. Some, as I say, are in crisis, but a lot looking to adapt, looking to diversify as part of, because COVID's really arrived and has forced them into that, or made them realise that they need to look at other markets or other ways of working. So again, the next paragraph says tailored support. So to make sure that we are working with all businesses in that inclusive growth agenda. We support access to funding from a range of different sources. So SOSI does have some funding, some grant funding, but also, as many maybe are not aware, there is a lot of funding out there, particularly around innovation and digital. So our specialists will scan the horizon to make sure that we're getting the right support and the right organisations there to work with that business to achieve its aims. And close partnership working. We're not here to come in and do that ourselves. The only way that we can be successful is to partnership with the local authorities, with Business Gateway, the chambers, FSB, the colleges, universities. Sorry if I've missed anyone, but all the different partners within the south of Scotland to really create a joined up approach. I just touch on a couple of things which I had mentioned, which was Fair Work. So we're not only guided by the Scottish Government, we are directed by the Scottish Government to deliver Fair Work agenda within the south of Scotland. So that connects into our inclusive growth. So that's about working with businesses and employees to look at where we can look at ways to for employers to really work with their staff to support them to maybe introduce, you know, more voice for their employees, to motivate their employees, and to really just look at, you know, I think South of Scotland is one of the lowest wages in nationally. So it's how can we help to improve the lives for the, you know, people in the south of Scotland, but also drive business efficiency as well, and really motivate staff and organisations. So Fair Work's one of the big things on our agenda. Also, net zero is another large part of what we're doing. And I don't know if anyone's seen recently that we've just appointed Dr. Martin Walensky as our Green Director. So a really big message there that we're really serious about net zero, and we'll be scoping out, I would imagine, support and how we can drive that forward within the south of Scotland as well. Could I get the next slide, please, Heather? The other thing is the digital support that's out there as well. We again are looking and scanning the horizon to see what else we can do to bring in support. But as you can see from the slide, there's a lot. I'll not go into all of it, but there's a lot of support already out there for digital. I think our task is to try and get that message out to the businesses in the south of Scotland, so engage that there is a lot of digital support there to help digital adoption, and we need to get that message out there. To help businesses to start digital adoption, which will help them with efficiencies, new processes and improvements. And really the last thing I wanted to say was, I didn't have any nice slides that you had, Shelley, about case studies, but they're all on our website. We also have worked with textiles, so Scottish Borders, textile industry, Sinclair Duncan around business development and growth. And also a company, I like this one, it's an embroidery company down in Sanquhar, who experienced a real increase in sales from some of the activity that was going around, online activity around COVID. And they needed a new machine because they couldn't meet the sales. So the company invested in the machine, and SOSI supported them with that through grant funding and also specialist support. So I think what I'm trying to get over here is that the South of Scotland Enterprise Agency, or as I'm saying SOSI, because I'm going into that jargon, so apologies, is that we're here to work with all different businesses. We're here to work with, we're not sector specific. There definitely is key sectors within the South of Scotland, but we're not sector specific. We will work with any size of business and any size of project as well. So I think if anything you take away from today is that we're open to working, you know, across the south of Scotland with businesses from all sectors and definitely all sizes. So you know, if you're a micro business, 1 or 2 person employee business, up to 250 plus business, we're there to support you, and we'll tailor that support to your needs. So what it is you need, that's what we'll do. So last slide, please, Heather. So please keep up to date with us. We really want to engage, not just with business, but with community organisations as well, because that's one of our remits, and also with partner organisations as well, so that we can have a really joined up approach in the south of Scotland. We have our Twitter and our LinkedIn. Also, if you want to drop an email and have a conversation, then please do. My email, I haven't put it on, which is very amiss of me, but if you drop an email to support at SOSI South of Scotland, then you know, the email will get to me, or you can find me on LinkedIn as well. But happy to have a conversation, and if we can support you, then that'd be great. So I'm now going to hand you over to Paul Mayfield from SRUC.
Thank you, Susan. Yeah, as Susan said, I'm Paul Mayfield. I work for the SAC Consulting in the food and drink division, although we're going through changes at the moment, so there won't be such a thing shortly. But I'll still be a consultant within SRUC. Although I work with food and drink businesses, I have an agricultural background, and more recently, I've got really interested in digital technologies and the application of digital technologies within the sector. I'm by no means a techie. I don't code or anything like that. It's much more about what they can do and whether they add value or not. Next, please, Heather. So just a little scene setting. We're in what's being called Agriculture 4.0, which is the sort of new agricultural innovation and growth area. Most of the other surges in agricultural technology have been around probably plants and sort of increase in yields, etc. This one, I think, is different in as much as it's much more technologically driven. And it's being driven by a whole load of factors. Now, I'm not going to run through all those, but you can see those, and there's actually many more that you can probably think of in there as well. And some of them are actually a bit of a conflicting one. So there's the governments in the plural drive for cheap food policy versus sort of sustainability and animal husbandry and all those things is an example. There's also skills and labour shortages within certain sectors within the rural economy, particularly in farming and things like fruit and vegetables, sort of harvesting and processing, and those areas. But even in just sort of simple farming areas, it can be difficult to get good workers and with the right skills. So there's a whole number of things is driving this, and the one I think that's sort of key in there is this thing around connectivity. Just before we started, we were having a bit of a discussion amongst the team here about connectivity, but it is gradually getting better across the rural economy, and is driving certainly the whole digital side of things, and hopefully in the not too distant future, you know, we'll all be able to get the necessary bandwidth to sort of gather and get data across the field. So next, please, Heather. So what we are going to see, just looking forward, sorry, this is going to be a very quick run through and quite a high level. I should have said this at the beginning, because all of these things are a seminar in their own right. So we can't, haven't got time to run into lots of detail, but I'll give you a few examples as we go along. So we're going to see greater automation. We're already beginning to see odd robots, and actually robots aren't particularly new in agriculture. Think about milking parlours, milking robot, automated. That's been around for several years now. It's been one of the few examples, but you know, has been around and quite well adopted within the dairy industry. We're beginning to see drones, which are being used to kind of keep an eye on crops, so and other things. It gives a quite close-up view, but from above, which can be really handy in identifying disease, in identifying problem areas within fields, and a number of other things. And this isn't just about agriculture; it's about the general environment as well. As particularly farm subsidies get push more towards environmental goods and looking after the countryside, biodiversity and things, then automation is going to be sort of key in that area as well. There's also the autonomous vehicle things that you can see the picture of there. So the driverless tractor. These things are quite possible at the moment. This is more to do with legislation, I think, that will hold back their implementation. And also the technology is probably not quite there. There's a number of images you can find on the internet of driverless tractors sort of in a ditch, basically. They didn't quite get the turning circle right and that type of thing. So there's a little way to go, but we're not that far off being seeing autonomous vehicles potentially operating on farms. Obviously, as I said, the soil and environment monitoring is key. We've been seeing variable rate and spot applications of things like fertilizer and agrochemicals. That's been increasing over the last few years, and it's been driven by technology as well. That red and yellow green map you see there is from a combine harvester, so it's a yield map. So as the combine goes through the field, it's measuring the yields at each part of the field as it harvests the crop, and it presents a map, so you can see where the good bits are, the bad bits, and the like. And it's amazing on seeing these on a field that looks quite uniform when it's ploughed or just bare soil, how much difference there is across a field. But using that, you can alter the rates of seed, fertilizer, chemicals, etc., to match the potential of each area in the field, and we'll see a lot more of that going forward. It's something that's been developing over a few years. There's a huge, or there will be a huge increase in what I've called here Internet of Things, IoT devices. This is mainly sensors, but there are other things. We're going to see these in our home as well. You know, you can now buy fridges and cookers that will tell you when you know, you need to top up with milk or whatever it might be. And there's similar things with on farms, but also measuring things like disease as it comes into a field, the crop health, weather, rainfall, all those kind of things, and they will feed back into the farm management system. And then, of course, there's satellite technologies, which has been about for quite some time. As I was saying, that with the crop yield monitors, that requires a satellite connection. But this is becoming much more sophisticated, and actually the detail that you can now get from satellite imagery is improving, and the accuracy as well, because at certain points it was within sort of 5 meters, which is fine in general, but we kind of want to get it more accurate. So satellites are going to be key, and there's hundreds of lumps of metal floating about up in space, and more being added to all the time. Interestingly, often very small now, low, and at quite low altitude, is that the right word? Anyway, low trajectory, circular around the Earth. That are doing specific things and creating a network of the whole globe that can feed back into agriculture and all sorts of other industries as well. And what these technologies are enabling, I've mentioned crops several times because that's my background, but also there's a potential for in the livestock sector as well. So attaching a small sensor to an animal allows you to track it. Our farm in Perthshire, our hill farm at Oxfordshire, they did a project where small tracking sensors were attached to sheep, and they were able to follow, view the sheep, the whole flock, where they were across the hills in real time. Again, using satellite technology. We demonstrated this at the Royal Highlands Show about 3 years ago now. So, and over time, they could get an understanding of where the sheep were grazing at certain times of the day, and how they could, you know, you might be able to use that or whatever. So. And other pieces of work that some of my colleagues are doing is health monitoring using sensors. So this ranges from sort of external health sensors that go on the outside of the animal to a small bolus that the animal swallows and then sits in the gut to allow for kind of real time, again, gut and health monitoring of that animal. And another interesting area, which I haven't got there, I've got a colleague who's working on face recognition of pigs, using face recognition technology, because they've discovered that actually using face recognition and AI, artificial intelligence, they're able to identify that the pig's expression can be used to identify whether it's under stress or not feeling well or happy or whatever it is. So this is ongoing work, but it's an area of face recognition that sort of I had never thought about, to be honest. Another one that you may have heard a little bit about is virtual fencing. So particularly on the hills, but it could be used elsewhere. This picture of the cow with the sensor attached around its neck is part of that. So again, in the hill farm in Perthshire, we had animals that have got these collars on, and the virtual fencing is fixed using GPS. And when the animal gets close to that virtual fence, it will receive a stimulus like a small electric shock as it gets closer and closer to the fence. So it gets to the point where hopefully it will turn around and go back the other way. And that's really what the project has been about. Does the potential, virtual fencing potential actually work? And in general, it does. It does seem to work for cattle, though I don't think they've done it with sheep yet. But this kind of opens up a whole interesting area, because you can think that if you're doing strip grazing where you're moving the fence every few days, if you don't have to physically do it, and all you have to do is open your computer and move the virtual fence forward by 20 meters or so, it'll save a lot of time and expense potentially to do this. So it's not just something for the hills, but and this is developing technology that is actually being used in some countries, but not so much here. But certainly it's pretty close. Next, please, Heather. Oh, thank you. Sorry. Right, as I said, the IoT devices are going to be ubiquitous, I think, across the piece. That top picture of tomatoes, there's a couple of small devices on there, so they can measure things like the nutrition that's getting into the fruit and the health of the plant and all sorts. And that's just on tomatoes. You can sit them in fields for whatever the reason might be. So that these things are now, don't like the term, but cheap as chips. They can be, just pence or a few pounds. So they're not quite a disposable item, but getting quite close to that. Robustness is an issue, but they are becoming increasingly robust as well. So to work in a rural environment, they're ubiquitous in many sectors, and I think they will continue to be or grow to be so in agriculture and food. Something you may have heard about more recently is blockchain, and I've got DLT there, distributed ledger technology. Blockchain has become a bit of an umbrella title for this sort of technology whereby assets can be tracked. It's come from Bitcoin and the whole cryptocurrency area, but it is the digital ledger that's the interesting bit, because it's on that the data is stored. So and it can be stored quite securely, because each entry is actually date stamped and is attached to the entry before and the entry after as well. So it's quite difficult to actually change that. So things like traceability, potential fraud, and those sort of areas, is an area where this can help in solve those problems. The other thing is that the ledger is that when it's updated, it updates through one update goes throughout the whole network. So it's real-time updates, and each member of the network, so say a supply chain, is able to see the data that you can limit who sees what. within that network. So the farmer might have all his field records and financial records on, etc., but he can control what the next stage in the process, it might be a processor or a merchant or something, what they see, what they need to see to take forward to the next stages of the supply chain. So this is actually a good way for presenting traceability or proving traceability, as I say, preventing fraud, and just sort of provenance and all those areas, and in sharing data actually in both directions up and down the supply chain. So we've done some work on this. I was involved in, well, actually it started with an interface innovation voucher. We had some oak, gluten-free oak growers come to us and saying we need to prove provenance, and we want to provide traceability back to where this was grown. They used the innovation voucher to ask us to look into what technology there was out there that would help them do this. We went out and talked to some of the tech companies, and we chose one who's used or got their own digital ledger. And we then found some further funding to test it out on farm, and it actually works. We're looking at further funding now to automate some of the data collection processes using IoT devices, but also extend that into other areas of the supply chain. Robotics I've talked about, but there's a one there you can see that is packing eggs. This, I think, will be limited to some degree within agriculture because robotics are really good at doing mundane, repetitive tasks, and there's not always, as we know on farm and in food processing areas, they're not. Although some of it's mundane, it's not always repetitive. So I think they will be limited. But you may have seen recently there's a robot that's been developed to pull out weeds. So it goes around the field and it's kind of got arms pulling out the weeds as it goes. So that uses a number of different technologies, including cameras and the like, to identify the weeds. I've talked about satellite and GPS, and then there are one or two others in here that I haven't mentioned, but artificial intelligence, I think, is the key to all this, because as I'll talk about in a minute, it's all very well getting all this data, but you've got to do something with it. And actually, I think artificial intelligence, although it has its connotations of being slightly creepy, if you like, has a real part to play in analysing and understanding the data that's coming back from all this different technologies out there. Next, Heather, please. I'm conscious of time, so I won't. Thank you. And it's not just digital technologies that are happening at the moment as well. We've also got different growing production technologies as well. So we've got this certainly growing interest and a growth in these controlled environment farms. A number of you may know there's one at IGS at the James Hutton Institute up at Dundee. There's one up there who have been doing a lot of work in this area and have got one of these farms. I've had a visit there, and it's really interesting to go and see. But interestingly, they started out from the technology point of view. So they're once they got it set up and to the point of growing plants, they then had to employ some horticulturalists to tell them how to grow plants, basically. So they are driven by technology. They use AI a lot. They use a small robot for moving the trays around, well, a large robot for moving the trays. They've got sensors everywhere. And so the whole place can be driven by or operated by about 3 people, and a number of whom are technologists and coders and the like. I was a part of another conference a few days ago that included people from all around the world looking at this whole area of controlled environment agriculture. And interestingly, it is a question that's been in the back of my mind. Interestingly, one of the speakers said that these things really are only going to really take off in areas where they can't grow particularly vegetables and leafy products outside because of the conditions, either too cold, too hot, not the right soil, whatever it might be. Where crops can be grown outside that are grown in these units, they can't really compete on cost and throughput, on volume. So it'll be interesting to see how these things develop in the UK. I think there are specialist niches where these things will actually work, and remote areas could have small versions of these for supplying things like salads all the year round. So I'm not saying they're not something for the UK, but I think the main market is not necessarily there. And there's a number of different methods of producing things indoors. So we've got hydroponics, which a lot of these things are, which is just growing in a liquid medium. We've got aquaponics that includes fish in this, so that you actually produce fish in a tank and use the water from those and their waste to actually help fertilize the crops. So we've got a small pilot unit with the young couple who are developing an aquaponics unit or project down at our Elmwood campus at Cooper. And then there's Aeroponics, which is actually growing them in the air. And that picture there showing the crop with the nodules on is an aeroponics. So they're misted rather than sitting in water or whatever. Interestingly, one area that this might the controlled environment agriculture might come in is actually the production of plugs and seed for the outdoor field-based industries. I know the place at Dundee at the James Hutton, they produce broccoli's plugs for transplanting for broccoli growers that normally I think took 30 odd days to get to the point where they're ready to plant out. They reduced that down to single figures, to about 9 days, because you can provide the ideal environment 24 hours a day. You can provide light 24 hours a day. You can provide food, you can water. And there was somebody again at this conference who said that whereas seed potatoes, if you've got a new variety or starting with small numbers, normally take about 18 months to get it up to commercial levels where they can sell as a seed into the industry. They can do it in 79 days, about 3 months indoors. So there's potential, as I said, in some of these areas. Next, please, Heather. Thank you. And lastly, biological innovation. So the whole thing around genome sequencing technologies is beginning to boom. And again, this is linked to data. So, understanding these. So we are seeing things like improved breeding programs, because they can now identify which genes provide the necessary or the ideal traits that the farmer or whatever may be looking for. They could, as we're seeing with humans, they're now identifying the genes that are causing diseases or causing issues, and gene manipulation can help prevent these or cure them, whichever you like. And as I've got there, trait selection, so could be something like being able to grow in an arid climate, increase resistance to certain diseases, increase yield without having to add more fertilizer, all that sort of thing. And all this data is digitized. So it can easily be passed around, very easily analyzed as well, as I say, using other tools like artificial intelligence. So all these things are feeding into this agriculture 4.0. Next, please, Heather. And it's not just, I've just slipped this in, really, it's not just farming that's seeing this increase in, as I said, things like sensors like AI and all these things, distributed ledger are working throughout the supply chain, but also it's perhaps changing the way in which we work. So we've got a top left Amazon, I know, and others in the States have tested out delivery using drones. In fact, we use something similar here. It was a sort of fixed wing drone, if you like. If you remember, right at the beginning of COVID, they were flying the medicines over to the Isle of Wight using a drone, a pilotless vehicle, if you like. At the moment, it's limited here because of the legislation that says the drone has to be in line of sight of the operator. So you can't do it over vast distances or into rural areas where, you know, they perhaps don't have right line of sight. But I think it will come. Again, it's all about confidence. And then you've got this automated top right automated delivery. This is in Milton Keynes. These little vehicles, the shop can have a key or a code that comes from the operator that allows them to open it, put the shopping in. It then trundles down the street on its own, and when it gets to the other end, the recipient also gets a code to open the top, and their shopping's delivered automatically. It's a pilot in Milton Keynes, but you know we could well see that. So and we're seeing robotics in kitchens now. So in certain kitchens, particularly the dark kitchens, as they call them, where they're doing takeaway food and that sort of area. So robotics is again doing the mundane stuff, making pizzas easily to do. So that's, you know, it's happening everywhere. Last one, I think. Yep. Right. So just a sort of, I suppose, put a slide dampener on this. There's been an explosion in data and data systems. So you've got Moore's law, which is to do more with the computing capacity, but basically it says that the capacity of computers doubles every 18 months to 2 years. But obviously, if the capacity doubles, then the data doubles as well, and we're seeing that all the time. So the questions that the industry needs to think about is who manages this data. So if it's being collected on the farm, do they have the capacity in their own systems to store that data? Do they have the capacity to analyze that data, to you know, actually act on it and that type of thing? And also, who owns that data? At the moment, farmers in particular give away huge amounts of data without really knowing it, and there is real potential for farmers to be able to be charged for that data, because there's businesses out there that really would like it. Not necessarily because of their individual farm, but collectively, if you've got loads of farmers, you can analyze it to identify trends and all sorts of things. So, you know, how are we going to get the industry to a point where farmers have control of their data, are able to analyze that data, or help to be analysed, that data, and then action it. And that is something that I think certainly as academics, we're starting to try to get to grips with. I'm not sure the industry's really thought about it yet, but perhaps need to in the not too distant future, because you know there is a potential new income stream here, and analysing data isn't going to be for everyone. So there's got to be sort of organisations like the enterprise bodies, like ourselves at SRUC, or like somebody else, the Agri Epicenter, who we're a member of, is starting to offer services that sort of go down this route, particularly with the storage of data. So we need to. There's work to be done there. I think quite a lot of work to be done there. I don't think data technologies is going to be for everyone. It'll be slow uptake with some, and with others it'll be much quicker. But it's coming because of the pushes and demands that are going to, pushes and pulls that are going to come from the rest of the industry and legislation and all those sort of things.
I'm Wilma Finlay from the Ethical Dairy, but we also run Cream of Galloway, which is probably better known, and that has been for 27 years now. We launched the Ethical Dairy in 2018, and we've had lots of questions about why we call ourselves the Ethical Dairy. And the main thing is what we're trying to do is get our story across as to what's behind that massive claim. and it's to do with environmental, it's to do with animal welfare, social, greenhouse gases. But the one thing that sticks in the mind, and the one thing that attracts consumers, is that we leave the dairy calves with their mothers. So when we launched in 2018, we'd had the experience of Cream of Galloway behind us, and we knew how difficult routes to market can be to maintain that story, and how important social media is. And also we thought that really we would need to be doing quite a lot of direct to consumer to keep that message going. And I did various business models where we reckoned that maybe 20% of our sales would be direct to consumer. And I also tried it that 80% of our sales were direct to consumer, but I never thought 80% of our sales going direct to consumer was ever going to be possible. But anyway, we were funded by Leader to do a marketing project, and that was over a couple of years, and that helped us, you know, to do lots of things, mainly social media, but it also helped us to go to exhibitions, trade exhibitions, and also a couple of consumer exhibitions, just to meet the kind of people that we thought would be interested in our product. Sorry, I should have said what our product is, which is cheese made with the milk from the farm. And so of course, if you go back to 2019, we were running at maybe just 10 online orders a week, and the rest was through the trade. But at Christmas, which is always the peak for cheese, we would do 200 to 300 orders for Christmas online. When we got back over to March, which was, you know, the COVID launch, we were still on the 10 orders a week online. By that April, we were at 300 orders a week online. So we had a Christmas every week for 3 months. And as you can imagine, any business with hospitality just died. So it was only a few shops that were maintained, and everything else was online. So we actually moved to 90% of our orders being online. And our website really, or a shop on our website really wasn't coping. We were using Shopify, and it's a great system, but there was lots of things that we needed that it didn't do for us. Specifically, people would place an order for a delivery on a specific date. It might be for Father's Day or for someone's birthday, or they wanted it for the weekend or something. So Shopify didn't allow us to do that. We had to download everything from Shopify into Sage, and then Sage would tell us what date they wanted. So a lot of my time was spent just on the admin of all these orders. And just we were constantly downloading to see where we were, because we set ourselves a target of only 150 orders a day going out. So we had to limit orders, we had to cut off sales for any specific dates. And we couldn't actually do that ourselves. We had to go back to the person that designed our website, and I'd be in contact with her at 9 o'clock on a Friday night, or sometimes sending her emails at 6 o'clock on a Saturday morning saying, we've got too many orders for Tuesday, will you stop any more orders coming in for Tuesday? So it was all, well, I suppose it was all learning, but it was full on just trying to keep on top of all these orders. By the time we got to Christmas of the one that's just passed, we did about 600 orders online. And by that time, we had a very, very good idea of all the limitations that there was of Shopify, and we had specified what we needed out of a new online shop. And it was mainly around things like being able to control the order dates, being able to put shelf life onto a product so that somebody couldn't order a product that existed now, but they wanted it in 2 months' time, by which time its use by date had gone. And obviously the very critical one is I myself can go in now and say, right, no more orders on that day, and just get on top of what's actually happening. There are still, and there's still things that a warning to anyone designing their own shop. you can take a lot of functionality for granted. You only notice the bits that are not working for you. You don't notice all the bits that you've just taken for granted. So there's still a few things in our new website that we can't do that we could do in Shopify. And we are currently looking at addressing all of these. The one major advantage that we were able to do ourselves, which we couldn't do in Shopify and was very, very expensive to do in Sage, was traceability. Any food company must be able to, let's pretend there's a recall. You've got a problem with a product, you need to recall all that stock of that batch. You've got to be able to recall it within 2 hours, or at least have the information to start that process. And we would try test recalls, and it would take me the best part of a day, because at Christmas I had a pile of paper that was about 12 inches high just for one of the days it was going. So it would take far too long to do. So we've now got that. We had a real live audit. I'm glad to say not a real live recall, a real live audit on Tuesday of this week, and we did it in 5 minutes. And it was only about 30 seconds getting that information from our own website. And the rest of the time was in getting that information out of Sage for all our trade orders. And what we're now looking at, and we haven't made up our minds yet, is do we put a trade section on our website so that we can actually have all that information going through our website as opposed to going through Sage. So that, but it's a big change, because every customer has a slightly different pricing structure and all the rest of it. But that's something that we like what we're doing so much that we are seriously considering about changing it again so that trade can order online.
Great, thank you so much to all of our speakers, and for those that are still with us, apologies for running slightly over. If you do have to leave, as I said, we'll follow up with presentations and contact details afterwards. A couple of nice comments coming through, just saying how useful today has been, just talking about the support that is available. And I think through the presentations, just identifying kind of the technology that's being used both operationally, process driven, and making a huge impact. And that came from both yourself, Wilma, and also Paul. And just following on from Susan's comment, there's so much support within the south of Scotland, but also out with that, I know that we've got attendees that have joined across the whole of Scotland, so Highlands Islands, rural, kind of Perthshire as well. So really just to flag a lot of the organisations that Susan mentioned, including our speakers, the Institute of Directors, the South of Scotland Enterprise. We've got Highlands and Islands Enterprise, Business Gateway, GrowBiz, South of Scottish Enterprise as well. So really close that you can develop those collaborations with any of those organisations, and Interface are very closely connected within each of those, and really just demonstrates how important that partnership work and who's out there to provide that support. But thank you, a big thank you to those that have joined this morning, to our speakers,